Good morning. Just wait for everyone to hop on. Justin, my man. All right. So I'm going to say my same message again. If you want to have money in the first quarter of next year, there has never been a more important time than to work your database right now. What you do in the next 2.5 months will dictate your income for the first 3 months of next year. So for those clients that you've orphaned that have not heard back from you in a while, the holidays are literally one of the best times to reach out to people and reactivate your database and have a follow-up plan to engage. So who has a situation that they've come up with in the last week that they'd like to share? Anybody? See, none of you went out and talked to anyone in the last week, and it's overwhelming to have so many people rush up all at once. All right, so I will then continue with the conversation that we had this morning. One of our agents had shared that she had a phone call with an attorney who was a referral. And the question that they had asked her was explaining the NAR settlement, which she did really well, where the attorney's response was, we should offer the buyer's agent more of an incentive. And then they flipped it, and then they turned around and said, well, we should offer you less. Does anyone have an idea why that happened?
Please repeat the question.
Well, the question was, the scenario that actually happened was an agent had to explain to an attorney and her wife and his wife about the NAR settlement. So she did a really good job, and their response was, we should actually pay the buyer the incentive, or the buyer's agent, whatever, however you want to call it, more. But we feel that we should only pay a listing agent 1%. Now, my first question is, why do you think that happened?
Because they thought that
This was the listing presentation. This was an initial call.
She didn't demonstrate her value in the listing presentation.
But here's the caveat: there was no presentation. It was a phone call.
But somehow she didn't demonstrate her value briefly.
Yep. Demonstration of value, right? Or explanation of services. Anybody else?
um I would have said, like, that's a really good question. Why don't we get together and show you how we can help you sell your property at the highest, best price and move forward. And the fees that we get is, think of your fees as an investment in selling your property, not a concession or a commission. So we start off that way. That's the only thing they really want to know.
So I would turn around to you, say, that's really great, but I'm not ready to meet. I'm speaking with a couple agents. Can you share with me what you exactly do?
That's a good question. Okay, what would I say? Mm, let me ask you, have you read the information, what the NAR settlement is all about?
Well, remember, this woman had the client explained to them
Oh, okay.
really well what the settlement was, and they were good on that end. They were more wondering what they actually do to sell the home, and what do they do in exchange for the compensation they receive?
Okay. So there are a bunch of things we do, and it might, first of all, I think, Mr. Seller, I appreciate you asking this question, but I thought it might be also benefit you if we know why this is no, where are you going, what's your timeline, and then we can address the different parts and say how we earn our fees.
But what does what you do to sell my house have anything to do with my timeline?
Everything.
Can you explain that to me?
timing is important. How we present your property is important. And obviously, the reason you're asking this question is you want to net the most money from your property. Is that correct?
Yep.
And therefore, you're questioning how and why you pay these, why we should pay, we, the representing you, should be paid X number of dollars or X percentage. Is that right?
Yeah. So what exactly do you do to sell my home?
I'm happy to share with you what I can do to sell your home. What would be a good time to meet and show you?
Okay. So ready? Give the group, give me feedback on this.
Is on this.
Justin, I can count on you for some
I mean,
honest.
one, I think you started in the right direction. Like, definitely want to find out what's the motivation to sell. Then two, if someone is like already coming up with a 1% number, I wouldn't go into that next question. I would ask them, how did you come up with that number? Right? To see what information they gathered. Then the next thing I would go into would be what's most important to you about the agent and company, and then focus on that part and showing our game plan for what's important to them. And then the fourth question would be, have you ever sold before? And if they have, like, what was their experience in selling? And then after we go over everything, right, then like ask them if they have any specific questions about our marketing plan or our communication plan. Because what I find with sellers is either marketing or communication. It's never really anything else. That if they had a bad experience in the past, it's usually those two things. And then if they still seem like they're unreasonable, then ask them, okay, so it sounds like you want to net the highest price, then kind of go into those kind of things. So
Yeah, and look, in the end, you don't want to seem evasive to the answer, right? And I would turn around and say to them, look, what we have found in the past, and tell me if this is correct for you, that there are two really key components in this outside of pricing and positioning your home on the market. It's the marketing plan and advertising plan along with the communication plan. So I would be happy to share with you in specifics exactly what you do, give you and your wife the right time to review it and discuss it. And then let's have a follow-up questions on the parts that are most important to you. Because in the end, to sit here and explain a marketing plan on a phone call, you would have to be so highly trained in sales in the way that you can't show them the materials. You don't have anything physically as a reference point. And you'd literally have to go point by point, asking them questions, getting them to give you anchoring statements, moving on to the next. And it would take a lot of time, right? So it's not something, and if they're an attorney, if somebody, I would say, look, I can appreciate that. It's very similar to the fact if I came in just giving you an idea that you had to go to court and defend me for a case, like how much would that cost? And you would say, well, there's a lot of different factors, right? Are we going to trial? What's the prep? So on and so forth. And we would need all the information to be able to do it. So we can give you what our general plan is that helps us get the results, is one of the reasons you contacted us. And then we can figure out how to customize it based on your unique preferences. So I would just send them all the information in email. I would send them the marketing plan, the communication plan, the stuff we went through in the last one, the calendar from contract to close, and say, this is the service that we provide. Andrea? Andrea, you have your hand up?
I do. Good morning.
Good morning.
I think I would start, because you said that it's an attorney. I would start by saying, oh, I'm really glad you brought that up. The next phase in my order of operations is to have a discovery call, because that's their language, discovery. To have a discovery call about what's most important to you in the sale of your home. Is your calendar handy so we can schedule that? Or a discovery meeting. And then I would go to, has anybody taken the time to go over with you the marketing plan, the communication plan, and everything else that we do in exchange for the compensation we receive. Great. Let's schedule a time to do that. Would you prefer it in Zoom or in person?
Exactly. So if you start looking at this, right, there are different ways to go about doing it. But look, the thing that this scenario inherently brings up for me is, where do we draw a line in our business? You can't just answer and haphazardly give people information is because what they want. And the more, to Andrea's point and what I was saying earlier, that you can relate it to the way that they work in their business, the more easy it's going to be for them to understand. But again, this just takes a lot of practice, right? I think people's misconception of hearing something and knowing how to do something is a big gap for all agents everywhere. But I've heard all this stuff already. Yeah, but you're not mastering this stuff. So, you hear something over and over again, then you practice it over and over again till the results of those get to a place of 90% you're able to get your desired outcome based off of memory. Then you can move on to the next thing. But I think as an industry, we genuinely discount how long that takes, right? I can look at Justin here. He's an easy example. Justin literally was my first client, right? And Justin, how many hours a week have you been practicing role playing for the last 4 years, 4.5 years?
I mean, I role play like at this point, I have so many conversations that it's kind of like role playing, but every conversation I'm not comfortable with having, I role play with my team. So that could be once a week to 5 times a week. I mean, I role play every scenario, and it's not even just client specific. It could be a conversation I'm going to have with another colleague or offer or with seller. I role play, all the time. Like, it's very important.
But when we started, right, let's go back 4 years and you didn't know how to do all this
Oh,
stuff.
we would do it like an hour a day, Monday through Friday.
So that's 20 hours a month.
Yeah.
Apply that out. Justin has over 500 plus hours of role playing, which puts him, in my mind, in the 0.001% in this industry. But he's like cold calling developers and getting appointments and developments, right? And like dealing with these kinds of people, it's a whole different level of skill than just resale properties of residential homes or apartments, right? So, and he's still here too, right? So the reason I use him as an example is it is a lifelong process of learning. And real estate is based on situations and scenarios. It's arguably what I would say one of the biggest challenges we have as a company with all the content we have is all of our content addresses situations and scenarios, but the way that the technology that houses it as it is today is built on titles and tags, right? That is the whole premise of our AI coach, in being able to serve you up the content you need based on your situation scenario, more like a coach than just a content warehouse, right? So a good exercise for all of us to do is understand what are the most common scenarios that we face on a day-to-day basis. Like, what's a common scenario for you, Namita?
I got stumped with this one. So, I don't, I think I get most of the time that it's pretty easy that I get the appointment and I get the listing because, they've seen my track record. I've talked to them a few times. So this was like a cold, she saw my name on the web and called. And so what I heard from her when I was asking questions was, about what kind of family, where did she work, and all these. So would commute be an issue, or when she's moving, will it? But she kept going back to like, you tell me when is a good time. You tell me, is it now, by the end of the year, spring or summer? Do you have data? I said, yes, we can provide you data. Then she said, yeah, I only have one kid. So I said, since she told me where she lived, so I sort of brought in some of the elements like that being a great for one thing, she said, oh, I live in South San Jose. And I told her, actually, it's a really nice area. I wouldn't say South San Jose. I would say I'm at the border of Los Gatos and in Cameron, and, you know, that sort of thing. So I helped her understand that she was in a good location and that homes in the area were selling quickly and commanding a price. And so she said, well, so I said, why do you want to move? And she said, well, we've been here 10 years and it's a good time to change. We think it's a good time to change. That's why we're wanting to move. Again, we have no timeline. So that's how the conversation went. She said, so how about if we meet and get together, and when is a good time for you? And looking at my calendar, and I'm traveling, we came up to like Friday the 25th. So basically she wants to know what's the value of my home, what ideas do I have if the house needs to be updated, how much time will it take, and then what, of course, our fees will be, and that's it. Those were the things that I have to go prepared with.
So here's what you want to identify, and here's the way to think through it. This is what they would call marketing, like an avatar of a client, right? Somebody who has identified a reason that they want to make a change, does not have a specific timeline, that is looking for you for guidance in a prescriptive approach, right? So if you look at those three things, that would tailor a conversation. To Justin's point, that's a scenario you could role play in practice, right? And then you'd have to identify why list now versus the spring, right? So, you know, then you'd have to go through your tool belt and see which tools you want to use at that point. But these are great things. Like, look, learning how to think through this more strategically is going to make a huge difference in your business.
I also would add in plan B if they don't get, you know, their perceived number within that expected time frame. What would be their plan B?
That's also my favorite question. If you're not able to sell at this price, what's your plan B? Right. So when somebody's tied to a number, right, it means that in their mind, they've spent the money and there's something that'll happen. So I'd say, Namita, you know, I understand that you want $1.2 million for your house. What will happen for you if you're able to sell at this number? She's going to give you an answer like, okay, great. If you're not able to get this number, what will not happen for you? And then they're going to actually like start showing their cards, and you're going to say, great, like if other buyers are not willing to pay 1.2 million, what is your plan B? And then you get to where they want to get to, right? And then you could figure out if there's someone you actually want to work with.
Yeah, and the other part was, of course, you know, the fees, the commissions. She wanted to know because everybody's saying different things. So she has a somewhat of an idea of what the NAR settlement is. So my question was, so I'm thinking, is it okay? I'm going to write her a thank you note, but also email her the different thing, what the NAR settlement means for you. And then we have one for the buyers and one for the sellers. It's from the Association of Realtors. Should I send that?
I would take it, I'd summarize it in chat, I would upload it into ChatGPT, and I would say, I'm a blank and blank agent sending this to a client. Like, please explain this so in simple bullet points, no more than 5, so another person can understand what the impact of this is, both for the buying side and both with the selling side. They don't want to read articles, right? It's literally when you hear what she was saying, like, I'm looking for direction, right?
Okay.
Andrews, you had your hand up again?
I was gonna ask, when you insert that question, what's your plan B?
That's after they're tied to the price, right?
So like in the comps, when you're reviewing
Yeah,
comps.
in that section, if you can't agree on price, it's the perfect place to ask.
Mhm.
But what if they don't say anything about the price? You know, they're like, so, looks good, price range, but then
Great.
they've talked to other agents, but they're not really telling you what their price is.
Look, this is your job to have authority and control, right? Like that's what it comes down to. So if they say they're good with it, say good to it. It's gonna get flushed out in the next step. Clearly, this person, from what you're telling me, has identified this as a multi-step approach. They're not
Mhm.
making the decision all at once.
Correct. It seems like that, yeah.
So you have to go through step by step, right? And saying what information be like, look, I understand you're in the information gathering phase. I want to just understand what will be most helpful for you. I'm going to send just that over. Let's review it, have a question based on your goals and expectations. And then when you're ready to take the next step, we'll go through it. And I want to move at the speed you want to move, whether that's faster, slower, or the way we're currently doing it. I want to make sure that it's on your timeline.
Mm. But that would be a conversation, not an email, correct?
Yeah. Or you can put it in an email if that's what they want, right? Like, look, it's input output, right? The input you put in are the questions you ask and get the output of the client, and based on that, you have to make a decision.
Hmm. Okay, we'll try.
Who else has a question?
The other question, since she said, asked about data, like is spring good or summer or end of the year? We have Patrick Carlisle's numbers. So would that be okay if I sent her something like that?
I don't know what Patrick Carlisle's numbers are.
Well, he gives data on in the last so many months during this many homes sold, this was the average price, this was
This
so
is
many
again, you're
days.
asking her to do your work. She's asking you just what
No.
you think. So you could
Okay.
say, here's what I think, and this is the data that supports why it's a good
All
read.
right. So my question was, is it okay to go ahead and send that data ahead?
If you explain the data as a reason for what your suggestion is, yeah. But if you should just send the data and you could say, here's the different data, what do you think works best for you? Then she's going to go to another agent. Because she's looking for, like, in a science experiment, there's like an observation, right? Like what you see, which would be the data. The inference is the conclusion you get from the data. People want inferences when they work with real estate people.
Got it. Uh-huh.
If we have a minute, then Shiraz, if you can you go through what you do or recommended conversations at an open house? I know one of the times, and I had missed some of it because I signed on late, we were going through asking somebody what's your favorite room in the house, where do
Yeah,
you
so when
start?
someone walks into an open house, given the time you have with them, right? Like you'll have to, use your discretion. But I'd walk in, I'd say, hey, Shrug, from Compass, nice to meet you. What's your name? And you'd say, John with the great hair. And I'd say, okay, great. And then I would say, hey, I know your time's really important. It's a Saturday. What specifically made you want to check out this house? And then I would start the conversation that way, right? And then you'd say, do you prefer to walk around on your own, or would you like me to give you a tour? And then based on that, like you have to follow their preference, right? Like the amount of agents that walk around, sometimes my son likes looking at open houses and like we walk around the house and he's an interesting kid. He's like, Daddy, like they didn't ask us one thing about us. Like he has some interesting conclusions, right? And he didn't ask us what rooms we liked. He didn't ask me if I had a room, like none of this stuff, right? So you want to get when you start with what brought them in the house, that opens the door to another conversation.
Okay.
Right. Thank you, Ron.
Yep.
It's and then you ask them like, like for us, it's about functional flow. Has anyone taken the time to share with you how functional flow works in the the home decision process. I'm like, no, what the heck is that? Right. I made the word up. So of course they're not going to know what it is. You say functional flow, like one of the biggest mistakes I see home buyers making is they just focus on rooms, bedrooms, bathrooms, space, updates. Where we think about functional flow are like, what are the most important rooms? What are the experiences you want to have, down to what they are, how your holiday plays out, what's it like during a weekday, what's it like in a weekend, how does that tie to the home, the community? And based on that understanding, we want to find a home that fits those needs and not try to fit those needs into a home. And then I'm like, oh, wow, that's different. And then, John, you better hope that they go to a bunch of other open houses, because then they'll see how different you are from other agents.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions? All right, well, then I'm going to give you, Miriam, you had a question.
Yeah, I have in general, what is the best response if somebody calls you and at the first right at the bat ask you for your commission fee? Right off the bat.
I would say I'm very happy to answer that question. Can I ask you a question quickly? And they should say yes. If they say no, then they're just shopping for the lowest rate. You're going to say, what's more important to you? The amount of equity that you net at the end of the sale, or how much you pay an agent? And see what they say. Right. And if you had to answer the question, I would say the investment of what do you charge on the listing side?
Me, 3.5%.
Okay, great. You could say, look, we think of commissions similar to like staying in hotels. There's like a Holiday Inn option and a Four Seasons options. Compass is a luxury brand. We offer a luxury service, which is similar to the Four Seasons. And the investment for our services is 3.5%. And it could or it couldn't be right for you. And whatever you do, I support you 100%. And that's it. Just be quiet.
Just leave it there.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to give you all a couple minutes back. If you want to hear an interesting conversation about buyer's agency, I have to do an Instagram live with a buddy of mine who's a lender out in San Francisco. So hop on Instagram. We'll be going on in a couple minutes. And look, just keep practicing, identifying your scenarios, identify your avatars, right? Like take a blend of what Namita said and what Justin said, and really start getting good at knocking these scenarios off to mastery one by one by one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharad.
You're welcome. Love in my heart. I love you all. I'll see you all tomorrow. And everyone have a powerful day. Bye,
You too.
everybody.